Hello. Thank you for your interest in our Social Emotional Learning Winter Series. This is a 6-part series with our friend Kendra Cram. Kendra is a social emotional learning teacher for the Minford Elementary School in Minford, Ohio. In her position, she teaches weekly SEL lessons to approximately 600 students grades kindergarten through 5th. As a result of her work, the students at Minford Elementary have over 200 hours of conversations on SEL topics such as self-awareness, decision-making, anger management, and much more before transitioning to middle school. Kendra earned a bachelor's degree in elementary education K-8 with an emphasis in intervention for students with learning and behavior disabilities and a master's degree in school counseling. Kendra's work has been highlighted by multiple media outlets from podcasts to national television programs like This Is Life with Lisa Lang. Her work has served as a model for numerous schools in Ohio and beyond. Kendra is passionate about trauma-informed care and providing mental health education and support to all children. Kendra also provides training to help equip her fellow teachers with the tools to support the children they serve. She is also a single mom to 3 amazing children. This series is brought to you by the West Virginia Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center. It is a collaboration between the West Virginia Autism Training Center and the West Virginia Department of Education. Video 1 of the 6-part series is on the introduction, the why and how behind social emotional learning.
Hi, Kendra.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Listen, we couldn't be more excited for you to be hanging out with us.
Thank you so much.
And we're also really excited about the value that you're going to be able to add to our teachers all over the state of West Virginia. I think the experiences you've had and the knowledge that you've developed is going to be huge in helping us support kids in the state of West Virginia, as is the case all over the country. We have a lot of kids that have a lot of needs. And I think the work you're doing is one of the many things we need to be doing to support them. But I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have and then the lessons you're going to be providing after this conversation to help get folks pointed in the right direction. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So first, let's introduce people to you and get a sense of who you are, where you come from, all that kind of stuff. So first and foremost, so you're a social emotional learning teacher? Like, what is that even?
Yeah, so I teach social emotional learning, and I teach it as a class. A lot of different school districts will have an SEL teacher, but they have them as someone who responds to behaviors throughout the building, throughout the school day, and builds behavior plans and things like that. So they have it as a tier 2 intervention. So the approach that we take is we want every student to learn these basic skills,
right.
Basic emotional regulation skills. So we provide this as an activity.
Okay.
So our kids go to music, gym, library, art, and social emotional learning class.
Okay.
So every single student in our school, kindergarten through 6th grade, gets 45 minutes of direct instruction on social emotional learning topics like conflict resolution, emotional
how
regulation.
Often is that, though?
Once a week.
Once a week.
So 45 minutes.
So you're part of the specials rotation?
Yeah, we're in the specials rotation. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So to kind of to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, so instead of the standard firefighter approach that maybe the SEL world might have been in the past, which is like, he's having a problem, send him to such and such, or we got to do an FBA. What you guys are doing is, this is a tier 1. Every student's getting access to this instruction. Now, I'm assuming we'll talk a little bit more later about there are some things I'm sure you do at tier 2 with like check-in, check-out, stuff like that. But so what you're saying is this is something for all kids. So the value on social emotional learning is being placed at a high level then.
Yes. So I love the firefighter analogy because I think it says it best. A lot of SEL teachers are firefighters in that they go to the behavior and they put out that fire. This is fire prevention. So we are approaching it in a new way, from a different angle, saying, we know everyone needs mental health support.
Right.
Every adult, every child, everyone. If you're human, you need some mental health support. Sure. So this is providing direct instruction of these skills to every single kid, recognizing that everyone, whether they've been through a trauma, whether they're at risk or not, every single child needs some mental health support.
Right.
So this is, instead of letting them fall into the river and then reaching our hand in and pulling them out of the river, this is going upstream to make sure they don't fall in.
Right.
So this is a different approach.
Right.
And every single student gets 189 hours of direct instruction on social emotional topics before they enter junior high.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So that's a lot of time spent that before just those conversations weren't happening as often.
And it's interesting, as I've done work throughout the country, I have seen where you'll have like some drop-in stuff with like a school counselor, like come in and do a lesson or whatever. But I even differentiate what you're doing as it's even a higher level of instruction and integration in the building, your relationships with the teachers, the lessons you're doing, the follow-up. And I think as people see how you format your lessons and the follow-up and everything, this is truly like next level application of SEL instruction for all kids. So I see that difference in what you're doing because of the innovative way that you've structured everything.
Yeah, because students are coming to social emotional learning class every single week.
Yes.
It follows a logical progression of skills of building from what we learned last week. And we teach other things very explicitly.
Yes.
We teach phonics, for example, very explicitly. We say, this is the letter E. This is the sound that the short E makes. This is the sound that the long E makes. This is how I and E work together. This is how E and A work together.
Right.
So we're so specific about how to teach even details like the letter E.
Right.
But then but for behavioral skills or life skills or self-management skills, we just leave kids kind of open to figure out that stuff on their own.
Right.
And any other thing that we teach in school, we're breaking those skills down and we're really explaining them very, very specifically and explicitly. So whenever kids have behavior issues, the difference here is we're approaching it as that child does not have that skill.
Skill deficit.
Yes, it's a skill deficit.
Right.
That if we're seeing a behavior that is unpleasant or undesirable, that it's not the child necessarily being bad, but it's that they have a skill deficit.
That's right.
And so just like we teach the letter E so explicitly, we need to teach behaviors and how to approach different things that we encounter in life on just trying to navigate through this world. Teaching those kind of things very explicitly. Like, what do I do when I feel nervous?
Right.
What do I do when I feel angry?
What does nervous even feel like?
Right.
What is this feeling I'm having, right?
Yes, learning how to recognize, wait a minute, I feel nervous right now, and here are some skills and some coping tools that I have in order to manage that emotion that I'm having. So whenever we empower children with this knowledge, it's a game changer. It's a complete game changer.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about, I want to talk about your background in just a minute, because I think your background is important because you're a teacher first.
Yes.
You're not a therapist.
No.
You're not. And I think that is probably the reason why what you've built is so exceptional, because you know how to teach skills. You know how to teach kids how to read. I don't know how to teach kids how to read. I don't have the first idea how to teach kids how to read. That's overwhelming me. But you know how to teach skills. So what you did was took the craft of teaching and applied it to social emotional learning. Because like I'm a clinician by trade, but you're a teacher by trade.
Yes.
So it makes perfect sense that you are the person building a tier 1 for all students instruction model. And I think that's something that as I've reflected back on it, like the way you just broke down how E and A plays together, I've been saying skill deficit, but you're able to say in a teacher way about that in a very specific way. But so how does one become an SEL teacher? Like where did it even come from? Why? I know when you and I first met, you were in the classroom.
Yes.
But behavior was like already a big part of your thinking about supporting kids from a personal and professional standpoint. So how did you come to be an SEL teacher?
So my bachelor's is in elementary education, and my component was in learning and behavior disabilities.
Okay.
And then my master's is in school counseling.
Okay.
So it was always an interest of mine.
So you are a counselor. You do have specific counseling training. Okay.
So it was always an interest of mine to reach kids in the at-risk category or through intervention. It's always been something that's been a passion of mine.
Right.
And I do you want me to talk about my own
It's up to
personal
you.
stuff?
Completely up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also my own children. I have 3 children. And my own children have experienced some trauma, and my youngest one especially is an adoptee from China, and she has been through significant trauma. So I just became passionate about how do I pull her out of it, and also looking around my classroom at multiple students. The year the year before I became an SEL teacher, I had 4 students who lost their parents that year.
Oh, wow.
And all of them had substance use in one shape or another related to the deaths. And so I had a year right before I became an SEL teacher where I had a lot of children that had significant trauma.
Right.
So this became just kind of something I was really interested in. But really started broadening my view of it and seeing who does not experience trauma at some point in their life. Everyone does. And everyone needs mental health support. So it just became something that I was passionate about. But when my district, when they decided that they wanted to start an SEL program, and we were just in the brainstorming stage, and I was so excited about this position.
Yeah.
But I didn't know where to start because what we knew, we wanted to approach it differently than some of the models that we had seen previously. We knew that we wanted to do going upstream and keeping kids from falling into the river.
That tier 1 approach.
And we knew we wanted a tier 1.
Because there's lots of tier 2, tier 3 examples out there.
Yes.
Right.
So we knew we wanted that. And so we decided to do it as an activity, as a special, just like music gym, those kind of things. And then it was curriculum. That was the next decision. And I had a lot of people, my amazing school psychologist, and Maren approached me and said, how about this program or this program? I looked at those and wrestled with those quite a bit because they were approaching it more like a counselor would instead of like a teacher would. And that's what we were just talking about, is that how a teacher, looks at breaking down the skills and direct instruction on how to do it. This is not group counseling. This isn't a group counseling session. This is, let me teach you some skills and put some tools in your toolbox on how to handle these different emotions. So it was I knew I wanted to do it in a different approach. And I knew I wanted to use what I knew about education and what I knew about the brain and what helps kids to learn in learning these skills as well. Just like I would teach phonics or fractions, I want to teach emotional regulation the same kind of way, with the same kind of approach, and with the same power of using what we know about the brain. So that's how we. So I did it the hard way.
Yes.
I think I did it the hard way because a scripted program would have been a lot easier. But we chose a different path. So.
And I think it's important to highlight that, because what you're going to be talking about in this video series isn't going to be, you have to do it this way, but what you're trying to show people is a framework.
Yes.
An approach. Not buy this exact book, these exact glasses, but I want you to think about instruction for SEL in this way. Now, people may still decide to buy the exact items and use them in the same way, but I think it's the same way with PBIS. That's what makes PBIS, in my mind, so much more effective, is because it's a framework and not a curriculum and a script. So it allows for cultural relevance. So your school has a different student population and student need than a school up the road from here.
For sure.
So if you just give people a scripted program, it doesn't bend and shift and respond, would be the best word, to the different needs that you're addressing. So yes, you took the hard way, but it's the right way because you had to build it for your kids.
Yes.
And for the demographics in your district, which is why, that's why I want to spend a second on this, because a lot of people might be inclined to say, oh, we're going to hire an SEL teacher and we're going to go pay $900, $1,000, $25,000 to get them this curriculum, and they'll teach that curriculum. But what you did was you started at needs drive programs.
That's right.
What do my kids need? And then you went and built it.
And I adjust it constantly. So I'll have the kindergarten teachers come to me and say, Kendra, we're really having a problem with this specific behavior.
Yes.
Well, that's next week's lesson.
Right.
That's next week's lesson.
Right.
Because it needs to be, the whole goal is we're trying to create a support system for our students for what they need.
Okay.
And it's creating a cultural change in our building. So that's something significant, is that as the needs change or as needs pop up, we're addressing those needs in a classroom with direct instruction.
Right.
So, when I'm giving talks with other teachers and doing some professional development, I'll say, turn to your partner and talk to them as if they were a student and tell them what respect is, or tell them what self-control is.
Right.
Well, everyone talks for about 2 minutes, and then the room eventually gets silent because we've run out of words.
Right.
What this is doing with SEL class is we are taking 45 minutes and talking about that topic.
Right.
For 45 minutes, we're exploring self-control, or
Right.
we're exploring respect. And we don't always, even as adults, have the language to be able to do that. So that was something difficult and challenging for me, was I need to do a whole class on self-control. And one class turned into 2 classes and 3 classes. I can do 3 now, where we're practicing and talking about and dissecting what does it mean to have self-control. And that's a game changer for kids.
Oh, yeah.
Like learning, how to do it. Kids are giving feedback about things to their parents and to teachers and even to each other. They're checking each other on some of these SEL skills.
Yeah.
So I had a student walking down the hallway with their arm around another student and said, "It sounds to me like you're in your downstairs room right now."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How cool.
Well, yes. And helping each other with skills. I had a parent give me some feedback about their child had gone to an event and had a complete meltdown, as that happens,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And when they got home, they sent her to her room and then later came and said, "Let's talk about what happened today." And she just very quickly said, "Well, I think the size of my reaction didn't match the size of my problem." So
Wow.
it's that kind of stuff that's being a game changer for our kids, because
Right.
they're able to reflect, and because we've spent so much time dissecting, what that looks like and what that feels like and what that, some examples and non-examples of that is, they're able to do that then in their own life and relate that. So that's a game changer for kids, and it's a
Right.
game changer for parents as
Right.
well.
Well, and I think what it does is it speaks to the fact that we know that the best time to work on challenging behavior is when it's not occurring. So a lot of times people try to focus those kind of lessons on a time when a kid's melting down, which is the exact wrong time to be
Right.
trying to teach those skills. In that moment, we want to decrease the stimulation, keep kids safe, make sure everybody's keeping themselves regulated, get back to safety. But what you're doing is we're equipping it in a safe, fun way. We're giving kids this information, these tools, in a safe and fun way, which means they're more likely to integrate it. And you integrate play so well, it also helps with that element of it as well, because they're integrating it the way kids integrate learning and things like that. So I love the fact that it's all about prevention and it's about equipping. And it makes the world not as scary a place for kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It creates some predictability and
Yes.
how we're going to respond. And one of the things that we do pretty much with any topic that we're talking about with SEL is we talk about scenarios. What would you do if this happened? We pull scenarios out of
Yes.
the hat and start talking about, well, how could we use self-control? What's an example of self-control in this scenario? And what's what would not be showing self-control, or how would you handle your anger, or how would you feel if this happened? As we're pulling out different scenarios. So we're trying always to bring it back to real life for the kids. And they come in and they tell me they're excited to share with me. I did, I was feeling stressed and I did some breathing exercises at home,
Right.
So it's exciting to hear that kind of thing. But
and I think to go with that, I think there's a lot of conversation around trauma right now, as there should be. Don't get me wrong. But beyond just being trauma informed is about developing resilience in kids. And the way you develop resilience is by developing skills. So what you're equipping kids with the breathing, is just like, I'm not at the mercy of my emotions right now, because I have skills. And when I have skills, I have confidence. When I have confidence, I'm resilient. So what everybody's talking a lot about trauma, but this is a response to supporting kids that have or will experience trauma, because we're giving them resilience, which I think is the best gift you can give a child.
For sure. I mean, no one's safe in this world, right? We are all at one point or another going to experience heartbreak, and we're all going to experience disappointments. We're all going to experience difficulties, and some of us are going to experience some real significant traumas.
That's right.
And some of the kids in our classroom already have.
Right.
So this is, what we're doing is we're breaking this down and giving kids the skills in order to navigate the rough waters of life, in order to be able to do that in a way that that's empowering.
Yes.
And that they're ready. They're ready for those things.
That's right.
And they go, wait a minute, I remember we talked about this.
That's right.
So being able to, and the other thing that's important about SEL class as far as resiliency is that we're helping kids to create some time for reflection. We go so much. Right. And we don't have, even if we have time to reflect on this skill or this skill, we're not spending a lot of time in our normal lives reflecting on our emotional skills.
Right.
So this creates some space to be able to kind of digest some of the things going on, and some of the skills that we have, and some of the skills we don't have, and some of the skills we need to learn.
Right.
So it's empowering. I kind of thought that in the beginning, or let me back up a little bit. I often get asked, how is this received throughout the school?
Yes.
Or how is this received?
And buy-in and all that?
Yeah, about buy-in. And that's not really a problem. That's not been a problem. Now I have to give major kudos to my administration, because they did a great job of setting the stage for social emotional learning. Our staff had trauma-informed care by you, and our staff had PBIS training. So there was a groundwork there that was important. But when you go to teachers and you say, what if we could teach your kids about how to handle their emotions and their behaviors?
Right.
Tell me what teacher
says no. I don't want kids that can solve problems in my classroom. The
buy-in is not the problem.
Right.
The buy-in is not a problem at all, because teachers are hungry for it. Teachers are ready for it. This is why teachers are burning out, is because the kids are coming to us a little bit differently than they did a few years ago.
Sure.
They're coming a little bit differently. And so the burnout and the exhaustion of this profession is a lot to do with the kids' emotional skills and with the kids' behaviors.
Right.
So giving the teachers and giving the students both tools in order to deal with these difficult and manage these difficult behaviors and emotions is a game changer.
Yep.
It changes the culture of my classroom. It changes the culture of my school whenever I'm embracing the fact that when I support kids' mental health, they do better academically.
Oh.
Absolutely. They're always going to.
Yes.
So so the teacher buy-in was not a problem, because the teachers were actually like, thank you. Finally.
Right.
Finally, we're looking at the whole picture here.
That's right.
And understanding that I can't teach this kid to read when they have all this going on in their heads. Right? And what we know about the brain, the things that we know about the brain is that when we're emotionally charged, when we're emotionally heightened, we're not learning as well.
We're surviving.
We're surviving.
Right.
Yeah, obviously we're not learning as well.
Right.
We're not doing as well.
Right.
So when I can get that emotional part of me calm down, when I learn how to regulate my own emotions, when I learn to regulate my body and how those emotions are affecting my body, I'm opening up my brain to be able to learn the academic content better.
Right.
So if I have a kid in trauma, this is why so many children in trauma have significant learning delays, because they're doing emotional work during academic instruction.
Right.
And so if we can help children to get regulated before we present academic content, they're absorbing that better.
Right.
And teachers get this.
Right.
Teachers understand this. Teachers are all in for this.
Mm-hmm.
So in our district, we were asked what our data was to support social emotional learning.
Okay.
And that's tough to say, well, 72% of our children, you know, you can't really pinpoint it that way.
Right.
But my principal, I have an amazing principal, and he actually said, well, wait a minute, hold on, let's back up a second. Before we started our SEL program, PBIS and trauma-informed care, that was the sandwich that we did all together at one time. We did PBIS in our entire building, trauma-informed care for all of our staff, and started a direct instruction SEL class as an activity.
Right.
So making that sandwich of all three of those things together, before that, we were having about 5 to 7 behavioral referrals to the office every week.
Okay. Weekly.
So, yeah, weekly.
Okay.
You know, one a day.
Right. Which isn't a crazy amount, but it's measurable. Right.
Yeah, it's measurable and it's typical. And after we implemented this for 1 year, we went 11 weeks without one behavioral referral to the office. So that showed that, okay, this is a game changer.
Kids are, and I think this is one of the things, kids are in instruction.
Yes.
See, that's the
they're
thing.
not missing instruction because of behaviors as much.
I know the first place you might go sometimes is, wow, that's a whole lot easier because you don't have any office discipline referrals. But if we believe that education is the intervention, which is kids being in the classroom, anytime the child's not in the classroom, they're not receiving intervention. So those 11 weeks, all the kids are in classrooms receiving intervention. Or receiving the intervention of education. I don't mean intervention as a tier 2 and tier 3. I mean, like, they were getting what they were supposed to get at school.
Sure. And not only that, but so were the kids around them.
Yes.
So were the kids around them.
Right.
So anytime there's a behavior disruption in a classroom, it doesn't just disrupt that child and that teacher. It disrupts the kids that are around them.
Right.
You've got a sweet little quiet kid that's sitting beside a kid that has a lot of behavior challenges.
Right.
That sweet little quiet child is often creates anxiety for that child. Right.
They're being impacted by that.
For sure, they're being impacted by it. You know, we're all impacted by our surroundings. So of course they are. So, turning that dial down and addressing this first, saying we're gonna address kids' mental health, emotional health, because we know and believe the research that tells us that that's going to impact their academic performance.
Absolutely, 100%.
So
I think one of the things I do want to mention, and I'm excited, we'll get into your lessons quickly too, but I wanted to mention though, one of the reasons why buy-in might have been also helpful is because your district made the decision to invest in SEL, not just put more on teachers for SEL. See, I think there's a difference between we're going to create a position, we're going to focus on this, the administration's behind you, versus where all the classroom teachers now have to have an SEL plan for their classroom. They have to build it. They have to do it. Now, some schools don't have as many resources as others. I do think there is an environment now from a funding standpoint where justifying SEL funding is an easier sell than maybe it might have been in the past.
For sure.
So I think there is something to be said for what you're going to show today. Classroom, or in the video series, classroom teachers can do some of these lessons themselves, but there is a place for placing the value on SEL for a position like yours.
For sure. My district dove in head first.
Yes.
What it is do we believe the research or do we not?
Right.
Do we believe that supporting kids' mental health and emotional health is going to help them
Mm-hmm.
in their life. Obviously, it will,
Yeah.
and also academically. Obviously, it
Is
will.
it worth the investment?
Is it worth the investment? It feels like it's soft skills.
Yes.
Right? It
Sure
feels
does.
like it's soft skills, but it's
Right.
actually the hardest skills to master.
Right.
And it's the skills that we need throughout our entire life. Not that I don't use algebra. I mean,
Sure.
yay for algebra. But I mean,
Yeah,
it
sure.
has a place. It's important. I'm not dissing its importance whatsoever.
Right.
But every single day that I wake up, I have to manage my thought life. I have to manage my emotions.
Right.
I have to manage my interactions with other people.
Right.
And in the past, we've not provided any instruction on that. We've just
Mhm.
expected kids to just learn these soft skills.
Right.
Figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You should know better. You
Mhm.
should know this by now. You're this years old.
Right.
So you should know that.
Right.
You should know that without ever providing them some instruction on those skills. And what we realize now, and what we're kind of backtracking is saying, wait a minute, we're expecting kids to know things that we haven't taught them.
Right.
In a world that's different.
Right.
than what it used to be. And
Mhm.
so taking that minute to put the importance on it and realize that it's vital for
Yes.
our kids.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, though, I think teachers have tried to integrate, and I'm sure you did this as a classroom teacher too, but you try to integrate as best you can some of this content and doing it as a part. But a lot of it ends up being reactive. A lot of
For
it
sure.
ends up being, firefighter-ish from the classroom perspective, the counselor perspective, the psychologist perspective. But this is truly an investment in, I always say, if something is important, it deserves an intentional practice. So if
Well
we
said.
really say SEL is important, if we believe that, then where's the investment? Where's the time? And I think what you have done and what the district has invested in is said it's so important. We're going to give it time, and we're going to give it money, and we're going to give it people. And I think that is a little bit of soul searching in education. I think we need to do, and I think it's unfair to teachers to just say, well, they're not teaching SEL well enough. Well, that's because teaching SEL is hard, and there's a lot that goes with it, and a variety of things. So I think it's important to show that there has to be the investment. I don't want a principal or a superintendent to watch this video series and say, well, I want all my teachers doing this stuff in addition to the other things they're doing. I think those leaders have to say, what am I going to do to show that SEL is a priority through funding, through positions, and through the actual getting behind this. So
Sure, and it took some creative work for my administration to figure out, how does this look?
Yes.
When we first started, you were there. We were all brainstorming on a whiteboard of our dreams of what this could look like. What in the perfect world, what would SEL be for our school district?
Right.
And how can we overcome some barriers to make that happen?
Right.
It did not fall in our laps. It was hard work. It was us rolling up our sleeves and figuring out, how can we make this the best thing that it can possibly be?
Right.
And I still have 20 more steps to get it to where I want it to be. But it's important to make the investment and to say, I believe that this is important, and we're going to make it happen. Right. We're going to have our own SEL plan for how we're supporting SEL in every single student's lives for our children, because we believe in educating the whole child.
Yes.
We believe in looking at a holistic view of how can we support this child. With the drug epidemic, with suicides, we were losing kids. We were educating them about phonics and fractions, but we were losing them.
Right.
And that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
That's right.
It's not enough.
Right.
So we wanted to teach them phonics and fractions. We also want to teach them how to function in their life, and how to manage and navigate through this world. So I do want to say, though, that it's super important that teachers are doing SEL in their classrooms.
Absolutely.
And I think the more we have put an emphasis in our district on SEL, the more teachers have been adopting it and incorporating it.
That's a good
And
point.
and connecting with me as the SEL teacher, saying, what are you teaching right now? How can I use this in my classroom?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into different classrooms, you might see posters of the zones of regulation where teachers are saying, what zone are you in? Or where are your emotions right now? Kind of things as an emotional check-in with their students. And recognizing that. So they're using some of the SEL skills that we teach in class in their classroom because they say it's making a difference.
Right.
We see that it is.
But they're being supported to do that. They're not just being told to do it as something extra.
For sure. Sure. This is something that would be easy. SEL skills is just like what we talked about earlier. How do you teach respect? Mm-hmm. How do you do a lesson on self-control?
Right.
Breaking some of these SEL skills down is really difficult and challenging. Mm-hmm. It's definitely the most challenging work I've ever done.
Oh, wow.
I've taught different grade levels, and I've been in regular and homeroom classrooms, and I've done intervention classrooms. This is the most challenging work that I've done because it's not something that is just that we normally talk about in conversation or that we're used to breaking down. Mm-hmm. There's not a great model on how to break down how to do this skill like there is phonics or fractions or something. So it's important that classroom teachers are looking at how can I do SEL lessons and integrate them into what we're doing. And we think of this as a great, big, huge, hard thing that I've got to make time for. And I do think that it needs a time slot in our day. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to have a time slot of some SEL instruction in a homeroom classroom. And I think it's important to have a mindful minute, take a mindful minute and to do some mindfulness in our classrooms. Right. But we can also incorporate it into all the literature that we read.
Yes.
How do you look at this character, look at this illustration of this character in this book, and at their body language or their facial expression. How do you think they're feeling? How do you think they're coping?
Right.
What could they have done better than what they did, in the story? So starting those conversations is something that's so important. Mm-hmm. But we're so pressured as homeroom teachers for all of our standards.
Right.
We're so pressured to get all of our standards in, and so
state tests and reading scores and iReady and all that stuff.
Yes. It gets to be a lot of pressure, which is contributing to teacher burnout as well.
Right.
But starting to demystify some of the SEL stuff and saying, "Oh, I can just do it naturally throughout." My reading instruction or incorporate tidbits of time throughout my day for different things that will help my students with SEL support.
So what you're saying is it becomes part of the culture.
Yes.
The SEL becomes part of the culture in the building. So here's what I'm excited for what we're going to do now. We're going to have a series of videos, and each one of these videos is going to be, you've hand selected some of your favorite lessons, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you've hand selected some of your favorite lessons, and you're going to take us through a sequence for each lesson and a structure that will help people understand how to, what's first things first whenever they're going into these lessons. And I know you've got a lot of hard work in building these, so I think it's going to be exciting for folks to see how you approach it. So real fast, before we wrap up on this, talk briefly about how you decided to structure your lessons.
So, like we said before, I wanted to approach this like a teacher does and break down break down the topic. So, I take whatever topic I'm working on, such as coping skills. Okay, and then I talk about coping skills, and we have some direct instruction and some conversation time where we're talking and introducing the topic.
Okay.
And then typically the next step is I read, I do a read aloud.
Okay.
I do some bibliotherapy. I choose a book that illustrates that topic of coping skills, whether it was an example of the character using coping skills or they didn't.
Okay.
Either way, it can springboard.
Example or non-example, right?
Example or non-example, I can springboard a conversation with my students. So first we're going to introduce the topic and dissect the topic. The second thing is we're going to do a read aloud and some bibliotherapy on it. And then the next thing that we need to do is we need to practice
Okay.
and play.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just that I'm going to tell you about it. We need to practice this.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're doing a lesson on coping skills, we're going to practice coping skills.
Okay.
If we're doing a lesson on self-control, we're going to do some play that practices self-control.
Makes sense.
So we know from research that so when we are building neural pathways, we can have instruction telling us,
Right.
over and over and over. And it takes so many repetitions of just listening to something to actually build a neural pathway in our brain.
Right.
But when we play, research tells us it's much faster.
Yes.
Like 18 repetitions as compared to several hundred repetitions. That when we incorporate play, children will build a neural pathway quicker.
It's much more efficient.
It's so much more efficient.
Right. And fun.
Yeah,
right.
Yes,
right.
And they want to come to class.
That's right.
So practicing it by trying out that skill with a partner or by ourselves or through a game or something where we're trying and practicing that skill is going to help kids to build it.
Yep.
So one of the examples that I give, and I'm using self-control, is we use self-control bubbles. And we'll talk about this in one of the videos later. But I blow bubbles on and the kids pop the bubbles.
Right.
And they're so excited and having a good time. And I say, okay, now this time I'm going to blow bubbles and I want you to not pop the bubbles.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I could do that.
So this is really, really tough. This is really tough for kids because now we're going to control our body and our impulses to not pop those bubbles.
Right.
And kids that you see typically having a lot of difficulty in class sitting still, that are super, super, super fidgety, or those kind of they can't do it.
Right.
They can't do that bubble popping.
Right. They can't avoid that impulse.
No, they cannot stop themselves.
Right.
And so it's interesting because we're like, oh, let's try again. Let's try again. And so we keep trying, and eventually they're so proud of themselves. Like, look, I didn't pop the bubbles. You know? And that is learning that skill in a fun way.
Perfect.
In a fun way that then applies later on because they're building those neural pathways to learn how to have self-control, and then it can apply to other places. So it's super exciting to think about how can I take this concept and have the child practice that concept and learn how to do it so that they can apply it later on in their real life.
Okay.
So I always incorporate some kind of play or practice into it. And a lot of times we'll do role plays and talk about scenarios. And this is the part of the lesson where we're up and moving. Okay.
So you're not just doing the whole, here's the book, talk about it. You're actually getting up moving. You're building those neural pathways through the play. And I'm sure that's part of when we talk about the lessons. That's the real creative element. Like anybody can do, well, not anybody. It's direct instruction. You're talking about content. Book, we can read a book. But building the play lessons, I'm sure that's been one of the most creative elements you've had to really have in there. Is that right?
It is. It has been very challenging for me to think of how can we practice this skill, or how can we play through this. That's been challenging, but super fun. But it's an important part of it is, we're setting up the lesson by talking about it. We're reading a book and looking at characters and how they handle that topic. And then we're playing with the topic, getting up and moving. So that's the structure of all of our SEL lessons in class. And kids are super excited to come and to play every time.
And that's what I'm excited about in the series that's coming up is you're going to break that down. You're going to give them an idea or concept. And then you're going to go from, you're going to say, here's how I teach it. Here's how I use literature to support it. And here's the play activity that I use. So you're giving them the framework and you're giving them the content to plug into the framework, which I think will be helpful to people starting out because they can actually take exactly maybe what you're doing and then apply that and then get a feel for it. And then I would imagine that as they get the feel for it, then their own creativity and educational experience will start to take over, and then they'll build based on the needs for their own students.
For sure. And this isn't something to be afraid of. You just have to dive right into it.
Yes.
doing SEL is better than not doing SEL.
That's
So that's the first. That's the first start is to say that anything that I do it's going to be right.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Talking about this is better than not talking about
That's
it.
Right.
And for me, I'm delivering. There's 5 first grade classrooms, for example, and so I do one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And my Friday lesson is better than my Monday lesson. It just is, for sure.
Because you've practiced.
Because I have practiced.
That's right. You've practiced.
I have practiced that skill. So it's not something that we're used to talking about as adults.
Yeah.
And so I just have to know. I just have to dive in, and I would just encourage educators to dive in and start talking about it. And when you do that, it breaks it down and makes it easier. The other thing that really would be helpful for a regular education teacher is to look at the state standards. There are state standards on social emotional learning, just like there are reading and math and everything else. So if you look at the state standards, it really helps you to get a framework of what my kids should be able to do socially and emotionally. And you will very quickly see the gaps. You'll very quickly be able to see when you look at these standards, oh, my second graders should be able to do these skills, and a lot of them can't.
Right.
So that would help me as an educator to say, here's some of the lessons that I need to do to support them.
Same things you do with reading.
Same thing I would do with reading, but I'm going to do it with social emotional learning. And I'm going to do it because I believe in educating the whole child. And I believe when I help them with their emotional topics and their social issues, I'm helping the whole school day. I'm helping the whole culture of our building, the whole culture of our classroom, and I'm helping them academically.
Right.
So when I realize that, it's so easy to say, I'm going to put a priority on this.
That's right. That's right. And I like that you brought up the standards because ultimately we do have to be mindful of the standards. But I think having that as like a guidepost to a degree, like, wow, these are the things my kids are expected to be. And then, there's times when, when we have departments of education and standards and all those kind of things we have to be thoughtful of as well. So we have to justify that we're not just doing this for fun, but this is actually a part of the written standards for education. So
for sure.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we want to do. I'm thrilled that we've been able to give people context of like kind of where this all came from. And you and I probably could do this for 2 or 3 hours.
For sure.
So what I want to do is let's give people some examples. I'm excited for people to hear how you've structured things. Well, the way I'm probably just as excited for people to hear the way you think as much as the things that you do. Because I think the way you think about what you do is what's going to help people approach this in a more effective way. So it's not just about the glasses or the glasses or the ball or whatever it might be. It's about I'm using this because I know this is how kids might learn best. And it's like, that's why I just have such an appreciation for you as an educator, because like the whole self-control thing, when you said the bubble thing, it's a brilliant idea. Like that's such a cool idea, but only someone with a creative educational mind can really go there. So I think I'm excited to get into lessons. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go.
For additional resources, please visit the West Virginia Early Childhood Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports website at www.wvecpbis.org. Thank you for viewing video 1 of our 6-part series on social emotional learning. If you would have any questions, please reach out to us at kelly9@marshall.edu or 304-696-2332. Be on the lookout for our next video, which will be on emotional awareness.